Hi folks, I'm Jack Kennedy and welcome to Farm Tech Talk, the livestock show. Once again, the big heat is gone, but the drop of rain is welcome for many farmers around the country. Shout out to our supporters, the European Milk Forum and Grassland Agro, for helping us make this happen. I'm going to talk to Adam, Aidan and Darren, and later in the show we'll be joined by David Corbett from Grassland Agro. Quick fire round, let's start. Remember, email your questions to farmtechtalk@farmersjournal.ie or WhatsApp 086 836 6465. Adam, looking to you first in terms of, I suppose, the beef job and what's happening. I mean, just to give us a feel for what's happening in the beef trade. Is it holding?
Yeah, Jack, maybe a little bit of a wobble last week in terms of towards the end of the week. Factories would have said to some agents that we're going to pull for 5 cents next week. That was probably on the back of, Jack, in the UK, you have what's called this pingdemic, where there was a lot of food service and food, people working in the food industry on factory lines in the UK were getting this, message to the phone that they had to self-isolate for 10 days. And that was leading big staff shortages in some factories in the UK. And that meant, I guess, that there became a big order in here for Irish beef. And I said factories just, one of the oldest tricks in the book, drop the price and we'll get the cattle. But it didn't work. And the quotes have held quite steady for the beginning of this week. So we're looking at, for 425 to 435 for bullocks, 430 to 440 for heifers, which is really steady and which has been there for the last 5 or 6 weeks. And it'll probably continue to be there for the next couple of weeks. I know looking at wheeling prices very, very strong, which is really, really positive as well.
Okay, so it's good. And I mean, it's good in other parts of the world, Adam. I mean, you've touched off this and we've touched off it here on Farm Tech Talk before. I mean, I was just looking, I just happened to see Uruguay there today. I mean, 370 a kilo, and this is for big beef, big beef farms, like ranches, I suppose a cattle. I mean, it'll be huge money to those South Americans in terms of the kind of the price lift. What'll mean for kind of those farmers is huge, we'll say this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, see a strong price like that in those countries, Jack, that means that females will be slaughtered. So there's a knock-on effect there that possibly it'll lead to a tightness in supplies, next year, the year after. So it's all a cycle, Jack. And I guess then when you get a big price, then maybe next year, maybe more heifers are bulled or whatever. So we're at the top of that cycle at the moment, and that's really, really positive for everybody. And look at China, probably at the back of it all. Uruguay's putting a lot of beef into China. China beef imports up 20%. We spoke about that already. And they're probably driving the whole world in terms of beef exports and beef imports.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the other piece, I was talking to a dairy farmer this week, and he was back from America. He was back from I think it was Texas he was in, but and this is a couple of years ago now, but he was over there working, and we were just talking about the hormone job over there. I mean, his full-time job on this particular ranch in Texas was hormones, and just getting the kind of hormones into the bullocks. And sometimes they were doing them every 6 months. But he was just kind of saying to me, you know what I mean, the difference it makes to cattle, you know what I mean, the hormone job, and it's he says it's revolutionary type stuff, you know what I mean, and I was just thinking to myself here, I mean, the bull beef job, the natural hormone that we have here in Ireland, we're not even allowed to use it,
No, it's unbelievable, Jack. People would say that's worth 25% in terms of the efficiency gains that they get from that hormone beef. Funny, I was on holidays last week, and my sister-in-law is just home from America, and she said whether it's in our head or not, but they would have ate beef over the last 12 months over there, and there's no comparison at all, she said, as regards the quality of beef in America versus the quality of beef here. Really good to hear and positive to hear. And whether that's the hormones, I don't know, but definitely the quality we have here is something to be said about.
Darren, over to you. In terms of, I suppose there's a question here in terms of, ask Darren, if he was buying your lambs for breeding, would he mix them with other lambs when they come home from the market, or what would he do?
Yeah, Jack, look, I suppose that's one that comes straight from some farmers thinking if you mix them, they'll pick up the diseases on the farm or vice versa, and they'll build up a bit of immunity. It's the wrong approach. What you should be doing is them lambs coming home off the trailer into a shed for 24 to 48 hours. And there's a suite of measures, Jack. We could talk for a long time, but in essence, worm control, check for lameness. You want to be doing them for liver fluke to prevent resistance, Clostridial disease if you don't know the background. And ideally, Jack, you'll be doing them for something for external parasites as well. All adds up to a bit of cost, but it safeguards your investment.
Yeah, big one. I'll never forget, Darren, we brought in a few lambs at home once, and I think strawberry foot we brought in, and I'll tell you, I remember it was a summer of strawberries that I won't want again. Next question, Darren, would Darren squeeze ram lambs that are 35 kilos, or would he let them run to 40 kilos and then let them off?
There's two answers to this, Jack. One is, if the lamb is over 3 months of age, he legally cannot be castrated. But you would have some fellas now that would have hill lambs that they'd just be weaning, that might be late May born. And look, there is lowland farmers that have pushed back lambing dates as well in recent years. I think it depends on the type of lamb, Jack. I'd have no bother squeezing a young lamb, but some of your stronger ram lambs that I suppose maybe are a few months, maybe 4 or 5 months old, I'd be slow on that, Jack. I'd be more segregating them, give them a bit of preferential treatment, feed them on, and you won't curtail or set back performance, and you'll get them gone quicker.
Okay, the demand will still be there in the market for them. Darren, we'll come back to you on that. Perfect. Aidan, 2 quick questions again for you. Is nice green grass really that bad for calves in the first 12 weeks of life? If yes, I will have to buy straw, but I have hay made a month ago that is real nice and soft and green. Aidan, hay for baby calves, I think is where he's coming from.
Oh, lots of farmers feed hay to young calves, Jack, and get on quite well with it and are adamant it's good for them. But by right, straw is better. They say straw is better. The risk with the hay is that it could cause this pot belly syndrome. And you see it the odd time where calves get this real, fat pot belly. Look, it's a relatively small risk. I'd say if you don't want to buy straw and you have the hay there, then work away with the hay. But just be conscious of it.
Aidan has second question for Aidan. Aidan, has Aidan any experience of the boluses to cure mastitis? That's all the information I have, Aidan, on that one. I don't know what type of boluses or anything.
Yeah, so I presume it's the homeopathic ones, Jack. To be honest, I don't. I've no experience with them. Some farmers use them and get on very well. I suppose the thing about these is that there's no antibiotics in them, so there's no real withdrawal period. But then if a cow has clots in the mastitis, we'll say, her milk needs to be withdrawn from the tank anyway. Look, I'd say it's very hit and miss, Jack. There are some of them are quite expensive for not a lot of science behind them, which is one thing that I'd be kind of conscious of. But a section of cows, Jack, will always cure themselves, even, a high percentage of cows will cure themselves without any treatment. So you just need to separate what the bolus is doing versus what nature is doing by itself. And there's a lot of uncertainty around it. So I'd be on the fence on it, but I'd be looking to get scientific papers to see, peer-reviewed studies to see which is actually, do these products actually work? And they're hard to get them off the manufacturers.
Excellent. Leaving it on that. Adam, in terms of weanlings, I suppose it's beginning to ramp up now in terms of numbers. You started off there a couple of weeks ago to slow in terms of just starting off. Are they coming out now, or is it still a bit early, end of July, kind of early August?
Yeah, probably a little bit early. First week of August, Jack, we'll see a lot of sales. We'll see a big sale in Roscrea next Wednesday. A show and sale of autumn type weanlings is always a really good gauger as to how the thing goes. Bank Holiday Monday as well, a big show of weanlings in Elphin. So there'll be 2 really good tests, I guess, for the weanling trade. But we're seeing it very, very positive. Especially that heavy weanling, Jack, 400 to 450 kilos. We're looking at sort of 270 to 290. That's up €100 on this time last year in terms of where that heavy weanling is. And the thinking is that I guess those big feeders and maybe feedlot feeders have got the nod from factories for the rest of the year in terms of beef price and contract beef prices. They're a short keep animal. An animal up at 450 kilos, goes into a bull beef system. It'll be back out again in 6 months. So they're just looking at them as short keep cattle, and they're very, very hungry for those at the moment. Really good to see for the suckler farmer. And even lighter type weanlings, they're up at 270 to 290 as well, which is really, really positive and really, really good to see. But look at numbers, they're tight at the moment. We'll know a lot more in 2 or 3 weeks time. A lot of those autumn weanlings will have been sold in 2 or 3 weeks time.
Adam, there was an export weanling webinar. Just tell us what was the kind of key messages, and can you watch that back, I presume?
Yeah, farmersjournal.ie. We had it there Thursday night, Jack. Really super farm. Nicholas Bergen farming just outside Roscrea in County Offaly. Over 100 cows, autumn calving, AIN for 33 years, using a lot of blue, heading for that export type market. You'd stand and look at the stock all day, Jack. You'd stand in the field and just in awe of them. E grade. And they're actually going to Roscrea next Wednesday, so people can log in on markbids.ie and watch that sale next Wednesday if they want to see how those weanlings go. But just look at a farmer on the top of his game, low level of mortality, managing cows really well coming up to calving, and just into the genetics. He's stopping at that real muscly point. He's going for an R-grade cow, an R-grade limousine cow, and then he's putting the real good blue bull on those, and he's just coming out with these super cattle. But he knows not to breed those super cattle again to keep them as replacements. He knows to let them off. And look at just getting on really well. Would have got €3 easy in the kilo in the past. He reckons he's going to hit 4 for some of them this year. So look, it was a really good watch and really good to get onto a farm like that and talk to Nicholas about his system.
He was a winner, I remember, in was it the Borbia competition previously?
He was.
Yeah. I mean, he's big into the genetics, Adam. Like, I mean, he's a real passion for it, a real interest in genetics, is fair to say. Like, yeah.
He has, yeah. He actually put up, Jack, a purpose-built suckler shed, and Darren has actually profiled it this week on the buildings page. Really interesting to see the design of it and see how it works for Nicholas. So, if people want to look at that on the buildings page this week, it's there.
Adam, and just for my information, in terms of the pool of weanlings that will be sold, like how many of them go for the export job? You know what I mean, relative to the other kind of categories of kind of sales. Like how many of them? Yeah,
sure. I suppose about 10 years ago, Jack, we would have been exporting a lot of weanlings to Italy, maybe up on 20,000, 30,000. We're back down there at 10,000 now, and a lot of those are actually sucked calves. So that export job is really, we'll say, cut well back. We do a lot of weanlings, obviously, to the north. We were doing a lot of weanlings to Turkey. We've done hardly any weanlings this year to Turkey at all. I think we were up at 25,000 one year. So that export job is there. And I put that to Nicholas on the night in terms of the genetics that he's using, those blue genetics. He's targeting an export market. But if you land into a market with a really good blue calf, you probably have maybe 2, possibly 3 men around that ring to purchase that blue calf. Whereas if you come in with a dinger of a Charlie or a limousine, that orange Goldie Charlie, you probably have 10 men around that ring. But he says you have to be at the top of the game. And if you're at the top of the game, you'll have those customers. If you're in the middle road with Belgian Blues, you're going nowhere. So that's where he's targeting, and that's where he's at, and he's doing a very good job at it.
Okay, nice watching for someone that's interested in that job. Last one, Adam, for you in terms of on-farm sales. Just talk to me in terms of, I suppose, is there much activity in that on-farm sales market, or does it seem to be more than previous, or kind of what's happening on that front? Like,
yeah, I guess online, Jack, has let this option there. We've seen some big dairy sales in the south take place over the last couple of months. Very successful. The farmer doesn't move his animals into the mart. It's all done through a mart, and the mart operates the sale, and the mart looks after the money, and the auctioneer sells the cattle. Mart Bids had their first really big, we'll say, on-farm sale last Saturday in County Monaghan, the Hart Peat pedigree dispersal, one of the largest pedigree herds in the country, and really it went to an absolute flyer, Jack. 57% of cattle sold online, 8 to the UK, 36 to the north, and it sort of opens up the possibilities, I guess, for the future. We've seen online bidding in marts, and I think we're going to see more of this on-farm selling possibly in the future, where animals just run through a ring on the farm, and it affords the opportunity there for online bidders to come in where they wouldn't have had in the past. A lot of the online bids that came in on Saturday was from long journeys away, which they mightn't have travelled if they didn't have the online bidding. So it gives another option. The sale grossed over 400,000, which is probably unheard of in terms of pedigree circles. So really good to see, and a good option there for farmers in the future.
Okay, Adam, thanks for that, and chat next week. Darren, moving to you in terms of the trade. I mean, we heard on the beef side, it's still fairly positive. I mean, it's still fairly positive on the lamb and hogget trade, I'd say.
Yeah, Jack, I'd actually say very positive, because usually we'd be talking about prices maybe back anywhere 20, 30, 40 cents in the wake of either ADA. That's been the way it's been for the last few years. Prices are probably back 10 cents, Jack. They steadied up this week again, and we've seen probably more buy-in in the marts and a bit of a strengthening for that slaughter fit lamb. And I think what's driving it, Jack, is people, I suppose, maybe drafted so hard up to now. There was such a push to get lambs out of the system in the last 2 weeks. The numbers are tight. Like mart managers are saying to me this week that if they had 800 or 1,000, say, slaughter fit lambs the week of Eid al-Adha, they're back to 200, 300 lambs. And a lot of them lambs are between 44 and 47 or 48 kilos. There isn't an abundance of heavier lambs in the system. So I think that has helped factories steady the price. Generally, lambs moving anywhere, Jack, from 6.20 a kilo to 6.35 a kilo. There is talk of maybe 5 cent more going. There's some allowances on carcass weight. There's some allowances on transport. But Ginny, Jack, like we're €1 a kilo above this time last year. And what a way to head into breeding sales, pedigree ram sales kicking off over the next couple of weekends. There's a few sales this weekend, and the big sheep breeding sales kicking off next week.
Yeah, so as you say, it's beginning to warm up on the breeding front. I mean, is it fair to say, Darren, there's a kind of a bit of a differentiation coming? Like my sample, my N=1 sample is that my buddy sold 5 nice ewe lambs, 50 kilos, 130, 131, I think he got for them. Whereas he sold 12 ram lambs, tails, the whole shoot and dandy. And he got a kind of 100, they were 45 kilos, a little bit lighter, but he got 117 for them, the kind of way. Like, so there's a gap emerging there in terms of the type of lambs that are coming to the market, like.
Definitely, Jack, and we're really seeing, I suppose, people hone in on presentation, and that is something that has to be applauded, because it does make a difference. Like, yourself, if you're going in looking for your lambs and they're nicely matched on heads, nicely matched on type, on weight, it makes a huge difference. And if anyone is wondering about, say, the ewe lamb trade, like we had a report from Dowra there in the paper last week, and like fantastic prices for light lambs. 38, 40 kilos selling up to 138, 140 euros. There has been some sales, Jack, 50 kilo lambs. You'll be talking the Real Right article now up to 150. Like, so I think there's going to be two types of demand there. There's going to be demand from farmers that say, if breeding hoggets are going to sell between 220 and 250 or 260 for the ones they generally buy, I'm going to turn to ewe lambs. And then there's also, I suppose, the people that have bought ewe hoggets for the last couple of years, and they've got on quite well with it, despite even being bought at higher prices. So I think it's horses for courses, Jack, but I do think that trade possibly be up 20 or 25 euros.
Okay, nice one. Darren, in terms of Tullamore Farm and in terms of lambs sold, we'll say, are drafted and kind of what's left, give us a picture of kind of what's happening there.
Yeah, really good year this year, Jack. Sean drafted another 51 lambs last week, brought it up. We've 107 lambs gone out, 210 lambs left. We've 36% of our lambs drafted, comparing to 17% for the same period last year. So well ahead. Now, look, I suppose last year we were caught at this time of the year. Grass supplies were tight. I think myself, Jack, there was probably an underlying issue with coccidiosis. Sean thinks that too. Fecal samples wasn't showing up a high level, but just lambs wasn't thriving. But this year, I suppose everything has fallen into place. The rain came when it was needed in Tullamore. We had enough grass, say, heading into that, I suppose, maybe vital in the June, start of July period, which generally catches Tullamore, and lambs are killing out of sight there. The latest batch of lambs killed out 48% average, carcass weight just shy of 21 kilos, and a price of 131 euros, 80 odd cent. Like the 107 lambs we've sold so far, they're coming in at about 132 euros, whereas the first 3 batches last year would be averaging about 114, and that was for a lot lighter percentage of lambs. Like, the other good thing, Jack, is if we were to add in the lambs we've drafted, the ewe lambs we're keeping, you could probably add in another 30 or another 40 lambs into that. Sean has sold maybe 30 or 40 lambs in recent years to, I suppose, repeat customers or people who are helping there on the farm. So, like, if you counted them in too, you're probably looking at half our lambs being drafted, which is a really good position. And he has a real nice crop of lambs this year. Our biggest question now is, what do we do going forward for breeding? Do we change ram type? Do we stick it the same? And that's something we're having discussions on at the moment.
Okay. And Darren, in terms of the lambs that are left, what's weaned or not weaned, or what's the plan there, kind of?
So Everton weaned since last week. Okay. There's one bunch of lambs on a small bit of meal. That's the lambs, say, that the yearling hoggets reared, or there was a bunch of maybe problem ewes and pet lambs. They were on about a half a kilo up to weaning, Jack. And just with grass supplies getting a bit tight last week, he decided he was going to continue to, I suppose, maybe feed on a small bit. We were talking, it was actually on Monday this week, on whether we'd come in and start feeding ram lambs, and Sean is happy enough with how they're doing, and what we're sort of trying to look at this year is what we can do off grass before we bring in meal. Now, look, we're not going to delay it too much, because to me it's a false economy that if we feed a small bit early as opposed to a big bit late, we've huge demand coming on for grass when we get into September for ewes breeding, for ewe hoggets, for ewe lambs, and also weanlings as they get older. We've that bunch of heifers for sale. So I think it will probably continue as we are for about maybe another 2 or 3 weeks. We'll take another few drafts, and then we'll whip off the ram lambs from the ewe lambs, put them into a separate batch, and we won't be feeding them much, Jack. Like last year, we got away with 400, 500 grams, but it just kept ticking the performance of ram lambs up, and we had a lot of sheep gone before they were really, I suppose, competing for grass.
Okay, yeah. I mean, and here we are, the end of July. I mean, the start of August. Like, so September isn't long about coming. So as you say, you're thinking about that now, like even because of the demand that's coming, as you say, as the even the weanlings get bigger and start consuming more grass. Darren, last one for you on the Thames job. The buildings cost review. There seems to be a nice shift in terms of the cost going up. Like, I mean, a lot of farmers have seen this in terms of actually real costs going up. They're buying steel, buying concrete, buying timber. Everything's up. Like, I mean, just talk to me about kind of what's happening there in the background and kind of where that's at.
Yeah, so I suppose, Jack, look, this is long awaited. We've talked about this for weeks. We've talked about prices of steel being up 20 to 30%, timber prices being up 30 to 35%. So Minister McConalogue announced it this week. It ties in with the new tranche open. So we mentioned last week that the last tranche closed last Friday and the new tranche opened on Saturday. So these costings only relate to the tranche going forward now. There is a bit of talk from farm organisations. They're looking for that to be backdated, saying that look at the costs are going to be in the system as well. So I don't know whether anything will happen on that, but I went through, say, all of the costings or where the costings have changed compared to the previous reference costs. And then typically, Jack, you're looking at 10% up. So if we take your new shed, whether that be a slatted shed, the sheep shed, the dairy, you're typically talking 10% along that side of things. If we're to look at the silage pit, about 10% up on that side of things. A bit of remedial work to existing silage pits is up about 5%, say for resurfacing or replacement of channels, that type of stuff. The other areas, I suppose, where there's a notable shift is on cattle handling facilities, the likes of, say, an automatic head crush, back crush, the two races, they're up 15%, whereas other equipment would be up 10%. The only one that sticks out in that is a calf dehorning crate is up 20%, and look at that would have been probably priced a bit lower before now and needed to be adjusted. On the sheep fencing side of things, the lowland sheep fence is up 15%. I think we'll hear a lot of talk next week from hill sheep farmers. There's a higher allocation there. So the previous sort of spend would be $5.64 per metre for lowland, €8 for a hill sheep block. The lowland one is up, the hill sheep one is unchanged. And the other couple of notable ones, a couple on the tillage side of things, a trailed straw chopper. Now, I'm not sure as of what exactly the spec is around that, Jack, but that's picked out on its own as being up 10%. Trailed fertilizer spreaders with GPS technology is up at 5%. And there's a couple of other trailed units, cultivators, that type of thing. I have to go into it a bit more detail for next week, but they're up between 5 and 10%. So look, positive, Jack, whether or not all farmers will be happy. I think farmers would have been probably more happy if it was backdated. And look, we'll see what happens on discussions about that going forward.
Okay, as you say, the tranche 22, and see if they can get that into it. I mean, there was a slight change in the dairy eligibility piece, Darren, was there?
Yeah, and that's one, Jack, I'd be cautious of going forward, because look, there's a lot of, I suppose, maybe restrictions coming into some of the dairy side, some of the dairy grant aid now, and you could say, is it to stop expansion a bit? Essentially, there was a rule in there that just say Jack Kennedy wanted to build a new static shed. He had to have the slurry storage in place for the existing cows on the farm, and then you could apply to build a shed. That has now also gone across other items of grant aid, which it wasn't. So the likes of the milking parlour, milking equipment, a dairy, that side of things, you're now going to need to have sufficient slurry storage in place. And I presume that's probably sufficient soil water storage in place. And it's probably just another area where there's slight clampdown around slurry storage without having a direct, I suppose, look at Aidan talked about there for many weeks around maybe what's going to come in a nitrates action plan review. But we're just seeing these little elements creep into other schemes as well, which is all pointing to the one direction of a lot more scrutiny around slurry storage on dairy farms.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, it's a kind of a conundrum thing. Like, you know, you think that the farmers, if they're short of it and they want to do what's best and want to put the slurry storage in place, that they should be able to do it. Like, you know, so it's a funny one. But look, that's the rules, and that's what we have to work with. Thanks, Darren. 100%. We'll leave it at that. You've given us a good feel for what's happening in terms of the trade and Tullamore Farm and the latest on the Thames. Aidan, looking at you on the dairy side of things, like in terms of, look, I suppose the big one is rainfall, grass growth, what's happening out there in the fields. That's still the kind of, I suppose, the core element of your people in terms of what's happening to them on their farms and how they're making money at the moment.
Yeah, Jack, and it's very variable. I mean, where I am at Tipperary, we got a good bit of rain, and then friends of mine 20 minutes away got no rain. Like, now they got bits of rain, but not the same level as other people. So basically, you're looking at anywhere between, I say, 0 millimeters over the last week up to 40. And in some cases, even 50 millimeters, depending on what's fallen over the last few days. So like it's very variable, and there's big differences on farms. So those that haven't got the rain are getting very tight, and will continue to get tight until proper rain comes. And like they've got soil moisture deficits of 50 to 60 millimeters. You know, they're going to need 30 or 40 millimeters to get them back to kind of a normal level. You don't need to go to 0. No one wants to go to 0. So yeah, that's kind of the size of it. So you're seeing farmers in the same parish doing very different things.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably fair to say, though, it's still not very bad just yet. You know, the kind of a way in terms of those that are in the extreme, that haven't got the rain even just yet, and like a lot of people are getting it kind of over the next couple of days. Like the long dry spell seems to be over. It's fair to say, yeah.
Yeah, and what was with that sun and heat was evapotranspiration, and that's no longer there now. Like the high levels of that, like you're losing 13 to 15 millimeters of soil moisture a day because of evapotranspiration. Like that's just cruel. And at that stage, we're seeing like grass withering up because it was being sucked out of it. So that's not there now. Yeah. And as I say, there's you know, the weather patterns have changed. There's more rain coming. Even if you didn't get much so far, you're likely to get more over the next week or so. A long period of unsettled weather is going to come now. But you're right. I mean, the average farmer is actually in a great position. You know, they have an average farm cover of around 200 per cow. They are growing 50 and their demand is in around 50. But now, you know, as we know, within averages, there's big variation, and that's where the issues are. But for the most part, Jack, I mean, farmers along the west are fine, farmers in the south are fine, a lot of farmers in the Midlands are fine. It's just, you know, the kind of peripheries of those areas, and even during the week, Wexford got a lot of rain, and they were getting no rain for an awful long time. So it's like I think it's positive, I have to say.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was up the west in Galway and that direction, and then over in Longford and Westmeath, and they were all fine. You know, in general, as you say, kind of the generic statement. You were down in Kerry, Aidan. Like, what's it like down there? We'll come to the quality milk job in a minute, but in terms of just grass supply in the Kerry region and that kind of thing.
Sure, good. Like, I mean, look, they were getting edgy for rain as well. But like they got plenty of it now as well. So I mean, they're fine. I mean, when I say getting edgy for rain, like, you know, it hadn't rained for a few weeks probably of proper rain. But like their soils down there, Jack, I mean, for the most part now, you know, excluding parts of North Kerry, which are very free draining, but for the most part, they hold on to moisture longer than elsewhere. So you're you know, they're going to suffer. They'll be the last to suffer, basically.
Good man. Just touching off that again, staying with the Kerry piece, like you have that focus on the quality, the milk quality and sustainable job. Just talk to me about kind of that and what the initiative is about, and I suppose some of the people you met.
Yeah, so there's a special focus in this week's paper. It's Kerry Agribusiness Milk Quality and Sustainability Awards. So I was asked to be one of the judges on it, and got the pleasure of visiting 9 farms over the last week or so. and we've then featured in the paper this week. It was the first time Kerry have done a milk quality award, so that's, you know, this is a feature now of farming life in Ireland, that you're going to do the co-ops and the processors have these quality awards, and I suppose it feeds in then to the larger one, the NDC one, in time then as well. But they look, were very interesting, big range in terms of herd size. So we went from, I think, 65 cows was the smallest herd to up to 320 cows was the largest herd. But generally, you know, 80-90 cows has been the norm. Top class performance in terms of milk quality. You just, like, you know, 60-70 of a cell count, TBCs of 4 and 5s is generally where they are at. And in terms of sustainability, then we also have the figures of the carbon footprint. So Kerry now are using the carbon footprint figure from the board STAS, you know, the sustainability dairy scheme. And that's on the milk check. So farmers see it every week, or every month that they get the milk check, the statement, they see what their carbon footprint is, and then they'll be working, I suppose, at the next audit to try and reduce that. So it's more real, I'd say, Jack, when it's more visible. Now look, there's debate around whether it's an accurate figure or not, and people debate that, and you know, like I'd say across the board it's very accurate, but in terms of if you're comparing you or I, you know, maybe it's not 100%, but at the end of the day, it's a national kind of a figure. So that's one side of it. But I mean, look, the practices that these farmers are doing were very sustainable, reducing fertilizer, using clover, protected urea, and one thing that stood out for me, I think of the 9 farms we visited, 4 or 5 of them had trading shoes in the yard. So I mean, really gone down the low emission soil spreading route, and the benefits of it, I suppose, it kind of opened my eyes, Jack. Like, you know, it's about reducing nitrogen fertilizer, because you can use a slurry during the summer when you couldn't have before if using a splash plate. So it's making the nutrients more efficient, the use of it more efficient.
Strategic use of the slurry, as you say. Like, and I suppose the other piece on the carbon job is that the sequestration piece and all the kind of the hedgerow piece and the carbon that's tied up in that is not accounted for in the footprint piece. That's the other part of the debate in terms of that carbon job, isn't it? Like,
absolutely. And like, you know, we've discussed it here before, like, when are we going to get a measure for that, and when is it going to be, you know, used, and when is it going to be recognized? And like, there's so many unknowns around that, but we kind of have a fair handle on our emissions. We just don't know what our sequestration is.
We touched off it briefly last week, Aidan, in terms of the grassland walk. Like, I mean, it was obviously it was pretty much a virtual job again, like we'll say. But I mean, a couple of queries this week in terms of reseeding with clover or top dressing with clover, in terms of is it gone too late in the year now for top dressing with clover, and is 1 kilo of clover enough to incorporate into a kind of a reseeding job? This is a kind of a standard normal one pass job. Like, is the 1 kilo of clover enough to put into that mix, and is it gone too late? Separate question, is it gone too late for top dressing with clover?
So in terms of the full reseed, I'd be going more than 1 kilo. I think the requirement for nitrates is 1 kilo, but to be honest, I'd be going 1.5 or 2 kilos. 2 kilos is probably a little bit on the strong side, but still in all, you know, now, going more does not necessarily mean you're going to have more clover in the sward. So working more pack are showing that seeding rate has a small enough overall effect on clover content, but you're still better off to get it in, because at this time of year, you know, it's getting late. So I'd be increasing the seeding rates. Oversowing is a definite no. I mean, it's way too late at this stage, and that's the clear message I got from the Irish Grassland Association walk. Kevin Moore in Galway and John Joe Sullivan down in Cork were both clear that, you know, to get best results from oversowing, you want to be going in with at least 2 kilos, and you want to be going in April and May. They would not go any later than that at this stage. It's April and May or nothing.
Okay, Aidan, last one just to touch off. I see it was a dairy representative that won the Teagasc FBD Student of the Year award. Deirdre McMahon, she's featured with us before, I suppose, in the journal, and she featured with us in Agri Careers and a few other bits and pieces of events that we had. You know, I mean, you know Deirdre and her husband Brian Hines in terms of what they've done, like we'll say, and what they're doing. I mean, they're very innovative. They're a good couple, and fair play to Deirdre, I suppose, for taking that award.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's great to see it. Their just background is in nursing, you know, so not you know, it's a new entrant. I suppose he wanted to, well, both herself and Brian are new entrants to dairy farm, but she's a new entrant to farming, full stop, really. And you know, fantastic to see. I mean, they're leasing a farm down in Clare. They're also farming themselves in Galway. We featured them, as I say, plenty of times before. But it's great to see dairy and West of Ireland, I suppose, getting ahead of the rest of the competition. Yeah.
Excellent. Aidan, 100%. Thanks for that. We must try and get Deirdre on the show for a chat. leave it at that, and I'll talk to you again next week. Earlier, we had a chat with David Corbett about some of the issues that myself and Aidan had a chat with. Let's have a listen to what we talked about. It's not often I get someone coming on the call and he's offering me sunflowers in the morning. Talk to me. You've a buddy that's involved in sunflowers, and he's doing it for a good cause.
That's right, Jack. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And yeah, Jack, an unusual one, but a mate of mine, Niall, and his father Sean Laughlin, in just outside Cashel there, in Kingstown. They've established a field of sunflowers, 3.5 acres. So I suppose they grew them in aid of the Irish Cancer Society. So they're fundraising for cancer, and I suppose they're inviting anyone that wants to come and see the sunflowers, take away a few. They put the sunflowers in April, and I suppose they're due to flower. They've started flowering, I suppose, due to be in full bloom there in the next week or two. So if anyone wants to go and see them, they can follow them on Instagram or Facebook. Have a look there. Kingstown Sunflowers is where it's at.
Yeah. Good job. No, fair play, good cause, and worth a shout out. David, in terms of reseeding and kind of, I suppose, there's it like I see around me, there's a bit of reseeding going on, you know, and you know, guys doing a nice job now because the weather is right and a drop of rain came, etc., and that kind of thing. And the early reseeds are getting a drop of rain and they're moving on. And what's going in now is kind of going in perfect conditions again. It's probably a decent enough year for kind of get a bit of reseeding done. Do you expect much to happen kind of in the autumn now in terms of reseeding?
Yeah, definitely, Jack. As you say, conditions are nearly just right now. There's moisture there, there's heat there. It's perfect for putting in a bit of seed. I know lads that might have got in seeds now 2 weeks ago, maybe skeptical enough, but the only thing, there wasn't moisture there, so seed would sit there until that moisture came. So that is positive. But I would say if you're thinking about doing a reseed, I know first thing is pick the paddock. That's first and foremost. Maybe if you're not measuring, just pick how many grazings you've got on a particular paddock, and if it's down the list, I'd say go for that. But yeah, it's great conditions, Jack. You know, yeah, sure. It's
good. Exactly. I mean, in terms of clover, David, like, I mean, there's guys asking me, like, you know, in terms of what clover to put in. A kilo and a half, 2 kilos. Like, I mean, what are you seeing happening out there in terms of how much clover guys are going in with the mix?
Yeah, I would say, Jack, you probably want to be getting 2.5 kilos into the mix. I know trying to establish that clover is difficult, and I suppose giving it every opportunity is foremost, and it's definitely important. I suppose there is a lot of competition there with the ryegrass. So I'd be saying 2.5 kilos, Jack, is and especially over sown, minimum 2.5 kilos. Probably a bit late, Jack, to be over sown clover. I would be leaving it off to next year if you are thinking about doing it. But I suppose spring reseeds, or reseeds that were done in the spring, I suppose you can really start managing them now around nitrogen and cutting back that nitrogen, even going with maybe 8 to 10 units. I suppose we're over that maybe 6 to 7 month period. So that clover will have maybe established well. You'll have those nodules on the ground and will be fixed in nitrogen. So there is an opportunity there to cut back.
And as you say, I mean, what you don't want to be doing is driving on the grass and trying to get it ahead of the clover. I mean, if you're even in a reseed now, David, if you're going in with clover in the mix, like, you still have to stay on top of it in terms of grazing management. Like, you don't want it getting into a heavy cover in the next kind of 6 to 8 weeks. Like.
Oh, that's it, Jack. Yeah, and you'll kill it out with the sword, and that's 100%. And I know it's great conditions now. I suppose for clover, there's heat in the ground, but I know, as we said, there is problems now around establishing it. But just on those reseeds as well, Jack, just getting that lime right is massive, especially for clover. Very sensitive to low pH. So even if pH is right, and we're going into the paddock and soil fertility reports look good, we still need to be getting in maybe a half ton or a ton of ground lime, or 2 or 3 bags of granulated lime. Very important. I suppose as that trash is breaking down and that surface acidity. P's and K's in Jack. Very important.
You're right. I mean, speaking of P's and K's, David, like, in terms of kind of, you know, aside from the reseeding job, like, you know, in terms of P's and K's for the autumn, and guys that maybe got a little bit of slurry out onto some of their low index paddocks for P and K, like we'll say, but still kind of maybe want to kind of, maybe top them up now, we'll say, as they kind of look into the autumn and maybe get a chance to kind of think about it. Like, I mean, what are you seeing out there happening in terms of guys that maybe kind of topping up in P and K?
Yeah, definitely, Jack. I suppose particularly around P, Jack, I'd be saying if I suppose my rule of thumb is go with your build up P in the springtime. A great response to phosphorus in the springtime, and you'll see it in the tonnage in that spring growth. And what I'll be saying with the maintenance phosphorus then is going around the mid-season, so around the May, June, July time, maybe split it, that maintenance into 2 splits. But I would say that timing for phosphorus is probably getting a bit late. We're not going to see those massive growth rates again. I suppose as we go into that vegetative stage, I suppose grass has stopped heading out, and that real burst of growth is kind of gone, Jack. So I'd be saying maybe up to the end of July, maybe first week in August, maybe that's our time in there for another bit of phosphorus. After that, I'd be cutting it out. I suppose rainfall is increasing, and we can see there is rainfall forecast. It's no harm, but wind doesn't stop then, Jack. And there's massive, I suppose, threat around losing that phosphorus. It's very, I suppose, liable to losses and runoff. And it's not, I suppose, the environmental side is one part of it, Jack, but I suppose the economic part and losing that phosphorus, it's an expensive nutrient. And I suppose we need to keep it there. Yeah.
And David, what type of product are guys using for kind of, as you say, that maintenance P? Like we'll say, what are they going out with? Like,
yeah, mostly, Jack. It's the likes of an 18-6-12, maybe splitting that going. It's a handy product. So you're getting in the NP and the K there, Jack.
Yeah.
I know farmers often worry about putting out K during the grazing season, and they like to leave it into the back end. But I would be saying, Jack, to get that K out, I suppose go with it now. If you're going that build up K, I wouldn't be leaving it off to September, October. Like the P, I suppose it's vulnerable to losses too. K is easily leached out of the soil. So I suppose just giving it every opportunity to get into the soil, to mix in and to build up that fertility as early as possible, Jack, and not to be leaving it, I suppose, after our cut off for nitrogen, which often does happen. But not be worried about grass tenure that this time of year. It's
Yeah, I was out around a couple of farms up in Galway, Longford, kind of Westmeath this week, David, and there's still a good bit of slurry in some slurry tanks. There's still a good bit of slurry out there that maybe didn't get on for one reason or another in kind of the spring. I mean, guys are maybe going to target that at places that they cut from kind of now on, we'll say, etc., and that kind of thing. I mean, it's a great resource to have. It's a great nutrient for that, and a lot of that will be strong on K, on potassium, won't it?
Definitely, Jack. Yeah, 100%. Great opportunity, and if the slurry is there, it's unbelievable, and it's saving on the pocket, and especially if you're going reseeding, Jack, 3,000 gallons of slurry there will at fairly good soil indices, for P's and K's. It's a great opportunity there. You wouldn't need to go with the bike. So yeah, massive opportunity. Full of K, great opportunity to build the K there as well, Jack. Yeah.
And it's amazing, David, on a lot more farms you're seeing, I see dribble bars or trailing shoes, or there's a lot more kind of that less equipment, we call it the low emission slurry spreading equipment there. There's a lot more of it on farms for guys that are tipping away at it and trying to get the slurry into the paddocks they want at a time they want.
That's it, Jack. Yeah, and it's great technology, and farmers are buying into it, and rightly so, Jack. We were down on the farm the other day, highly stocked farm now, and I suppose he goes with washings and slurry and whatnot throughout the year, but he finds the dribble bar exceptional, even for getting those graze outs. And I know with the splash bed there is it does sour grass and sticks to grass and that, but unbelievable what it's doing for him, and he can go out with ease, onto maybe covers of 1,000 or less, and there's no problem getting graze outs after that. It's unbelievable technology, Jack,
Right, folks, that's it for another week. Thanks for watching, and again, thanks for listening. Thanks to all our guests once again. If you want more from Farmers Journal webinars, go to ifj.ie/webinars, or you can listen to this show on a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back again next week. Until then, stay safe and safe farming. Bye.